Before we get into the heart of the matter, which is going to be one of my favorite lines in Scripture from Jesus during a whole chapter, really, where he gets a little assertive, darn near aggressive, I think. I'm going to tell a story about some things I've experienced in my life. We've discussed it here before, and one of these days I want to do a full group on it, but I like to call it the Dorothy mirror. Now, at the end of Wizard of Oz, Dorothy wakes up from the dream that she was in, and she sees a bunch of people. And who are those people? Well, they were people that were just in the dream she was having. Now, they didn't know that. They looked at her, and they're just happy that Dorothy was back, right? And she was like, wait, and you were there, and you were there, and you were there. And a few times to you guys in this group over the years, I've mentioned how every once in a while I feel like Dorothy. I'm like, wait a minute. You guys are all looking at me a little funny. Like, I'm the one that just woke up. And here I am talking about waking up, and I'm like, you guys are already awake, aren't you? Just like at the end of Wizard of Oz. And it's nice. It keeps me humble. It also allows me to apply the awesome concept called the mirror. Because I don't know. Who knows who else is awakened anyways? There's a vibe we can feel sometimes. But the mirror is using each other as teammates to help ourselves grow. So Dorothy, literally in the Wizard of Oz, she fell asleep and she used everyone else in that dream to get her to where she needed to go, the yellow brick road to meet Oz, which is God, which is really just a projection anyways. And she did end up waking up, didn't she? Interesting. And there were a lot of characters along the way that helped her do that. That's my life, and that's what you are to me, and everyone else in my life. Just characters in my dream. One of my favorite spiritual lines, the highest level of self-awareness is to realize that you are a dream figure in someone else's dream. And so this is all of us all the time. We're all Dorothy. We're either asleep in the dream or we just awakened and realized everyone else was just playing a role for us, right? But more than anything, it's an empowering accelerant to spirituality because it puts the responsibility on the individual all the time. Buddha's last words, strive for your own liberation with intelligence. Jesus, don't worry about a speck in your neighbor's eye when you have a log in your own. This means figure yourself out. Stop trying to figure out everything external to you. Figure your stuff out. So it's an accelerant. If I look at you and I think, mirror, 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 you're reflecting something back to me, then that's going to help me get there much quicker, like Carl Jung would say. If you look outside, you dream. When you look inside, you awaken. If I reflect on what I'm seeing outside here and it pushes me inside of here, then I'm going to awaken much quicker. Okay? So, the concept that we'll be talking about, or the scripture we're going to be talking about, it's important to say beforehand, just because something is easy to understand does not mean it's easy to do, okay? We're going to make this verse from Matthew easy to understand. Doesn't mean it's easy to do. But it is easier than doing it any other way. I've got up here Matthew 11:30, in which Jesus talks about how the yoke, which is the things that connect, the things on the oxen that connect them, to each other and to the burden in the back, that yoke, he says, is easy, which means it's comfortable. You yoke yourself to the teachings of Jesus, it's way easier than any other way, okay? And it's about the only time I ever came across the word easy in any scripture or spiritual teaching or philosophy. Not much is easy, but this way is a lot easier because the way we usually do it from the perspective of the ego is much, much harder. I mean, the ego is literally in the world of duality, which is conflict. It is yin versus yang, right? And good and evil and all that kind of stuff. And because we often operate, if not always for a long period of time, operate from the ego, stuff is confusing. And the world seems chaotic. Well, it's so difficult out there. It's so chaotic. What are we going to do now? As C.S. Lewis said, how about not exaggerating the novelty of your circumstances? Because life has been like this for all people, always. It's not changed, just the different external stuff has changed. It's always difficult when we think from the ego. But when you think from the spirit, which is given to all of us to do, when you think from the spirit, it gets much easier. Again, I'm not saying it's easy to do. It's just easier than doing it any other way, okay? So that leads me to the scripture, Matthew 23:24. Now it's part of a long chapter in which Jesus is really chewing out the Pharisees. Okay, some of the teachers of the day, the leaders of the day, and he's talking to them, and he keeps calling them hypocrites and things like blind guides. Now I've got a side note here. What is hypocrisy? Hypocrisy is claiming to have beliefs when your behaviors don't match. And I've been thinking about this for a long time, or like a decade or so at least. It's like, are you a hypocrite if you know you're being a hypocrite? Because I know I have beliefs that I claim and things that I'll talk about all the time, but my behaviors don't always match. Am I being a hypocrite then? I know I'm being a hypocrite, so I hope that saves me from being a hypocrite. Nevertheless, it's true. I don't want to be a hypocrite and proclaim things that I'm not living. And that's a feeling that, of course, doesn't feel good, but Jesus calls out very directly. He says it again and again in Matthew 23 to the Pharisees to not be a hypocrite. Okay? Well, this particular passage, he varies it a little bit. He says, you blind guides, okay? You blind guides, exclamation point. You strain out a gnat but swallow a camel. Now, that's not one I hear in church very often either, okay? And it's quite descriptive and interesting that he's using that kind of imagery. What is he referring to there? Now, let's start with you blind guides. Once again, people often read the Bible literally, and they assume that these certain words in there must mean certain things, because of course, right? It's obvious. Well, is he referring to actual blind people? I mean, isn't that one of those obvious ones? Is he referring to people that no longer have sight, and they're trying to physically guide people somewhere? No, he's literally referring to people who do not have spiritual sight, and they're trying to guide people. Sort of like me, okay? And you're blind if you're not. It's the hypocrisy part of it, okay? You're not actually doing what you proclaim to say you know what to do. Therefore, you're a blind guide. And every time I've heard that, I'm like, okay, I feel that one personally, okay? Well, straining out a gnat and swallowing a camel, it's fascinating. There's lots of interpretations, and a lot of people think of it a lot of different ways. For me, it's biting off more than you can chew, pretty simply. You got a little gnat and a big camel. That's fairly simple. But I like to think of it as more of a biological process. Quite literally, if you've consumed a camel, and all you do is strain out a gnat, okay, you're full of something. And the truth is that Jesus being really clever, I think, okay? Because you're putting in a whole lot of work eating a camel, and you're not getting any output. If you put in maximum effort and minimal output, that's very inefficient. And you're wasting a lot of time and a lot of energy. Working so hard to figure out what we're supposed to do here and donating all this time and effort to mankind and our development. And there's a lot of time put in for a lot of people, and we're not getting anywhere. Right? A whole lot of hypocrisy going on, but I'm just talking about me today. There's a lot of hypocrisy going on when you proclaim to know certain things and you put a lot of effort in. For example, you could try to work on your nutrition and exercise, right? Read a lot of books. In fact, you might want to read the Bible and the Quran and the Bhagavad Gita and the Dhammapada and the Tao Te Ching, and you might want to read the Tibetan Book of the Dead and the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying. Should I keep going? Okay, I've read all those things a couple times. Course of Miracles, okay. Woo, that's a lot of effort. How much did I get out of it? How much output? You could do other things, relationships. I work so hard in relationships, or politics. You think you figured all this stuff out, right? And everyone knows that they're right because of this and that and blah, blah, blah. It's why we're not getting anywhere, because it's so much simpler than that. The simplicity of all of this is not figuring out all the physical human things to do. It's not. It's why we're not getting anywhere. It's not deciding what the right political decision is, or the right food to eat, or the right movement to do in yoga, or any of that kind of stuff. I literally heard Sadhguru talk about yoga the other day, and he goes, well, I don't know why Americans are doing all these crazy postures. He says, this is yoga. He says, all you're supposed to do is do this, balance yourself, and look with gratitude. That's yoga. I'm like, okay. So much for all these poses that we're doing, but also all the books that I've read and all the various things that I've studied, or all the things you try to do, books that I've written. Am I getting anywhere? I have a YouTube channel with about 250 videos dedicated to spiritual teachings, okay? I've written a couple books, one of which purports to have solved the addiction, especially the opioid problem. I've got 22 years as a therapist in which I work like 24/7 with this exact stuff with people. And yet, I'm still a hypocrite. Especially recently, worrying about certain things that I can't quite get a hold of. Worrying about things that I'm not supposed to be worrying about. Worry about things that are completely ineffective to do. And that doesn't feel good. All of us know that. Especially, it's more difficult if you know better, because that hypocrisy thing is there. But it's also when you know your master's will and you don't make ready according to his will, you will receive a severe beating. When you know better, you're higher up, right? You're walking a tightrope. You're not better. You're just going to feel it more if you don't actually practice that which you've been working on. Whole lot of spiritual people, or people think that they're spiritual in the world, think they figured it out. Jesus is telling us straight up, no, you're working on a lot of stuff, but you're producing a gnat. Okay? Not getting very far with that good work that you think you've done. Oh, but I know what everybody needs. I don't know. So personally, this is my experience that I felt this week. Okay? And it's ironic because 15 years ago, when my father-in-law, your father passed away, I read at his funeral a reading from Rumi in which Rumi says you're only supposed to be doing one thing. Now, I was an honor to read at his wedding, at his funeral.
He married somebody.
He married. He passed away, and I got to read something, and I read Rumi's comment on the one thing we're supposed to be doing. And he says, man tries to do countless number of things. And he said, but we only came here to do one thing. It's as if a king sends you into the town to do one task. You come back and have done a bunch of other tasks, but not that one task, you've done nothing. But if you do that one thing that you were asked to do and you bring that back, you've done everything. Rumi says what we're here to do is to connect to our divine true nature. All the other stuff is secondary. And yet we're doing this and doing that, trying to figure out humanity and all the things we need to do. If you don't connect to your divine true nature, you will have done nothing whatsoever. I've known this for 15 years. I've quoted in this group many times before. I think of it on a regular basis. Am I doing it? Well, the big one that hit me the other day, which changed this for me, I changed it at least temporarily, hopefully I get better at it, was from a reading from Course in Miracles. And it was so on point, if you've ever gone through that book. It really drills down into truth, and it just makes it so clear. And so the Rumi thing I love, and I'm aware of all these various spiritual teachings. But the Course in Miracles just got to the point, and I'm not going to go any deeper than this, because you don't need to. It says this: your function is to love. You need any more? See, our body has a bunch of functions to it. Your heart pump blood, and your stomach and your intestines, process food, or of course your lungs are processing oxygen. Functions, right? Well, my function is to love. And as we were talking about it in a group, and I was like, wait a minute, what else are you supposed to be doing? Nothing. Why would you need to make this any more complicated? It's actually really simple. My function is to love. Now, we're going to talk about the word love a little bit more in a second, but I've got this drawing here. I love my drawings, right? Nice and simple. This is you, and you are like the sun. I've got the sun up there. Right before Jesus says, you blind guides, you're straining out a gnat when you've swallowed a camel. Right before that, he said, the one commandment is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. The one commandment. The other is like it, is to love another. The other is like it, he says, it's to love another as oneself. That's it. Where did he say? Make sure you read books. Make sure you go to church on Sundays, right? Make sure you figure out politics for everyone to get your wisdom, okay? He even said, don't worry about what you eat. He said exercise profits little. Spiritual exercise is profitable in every way, though. And to find the light inside of you, that's why I got the sun up here, is it. The one thing. Now, I wrote it, with love, with all your heart, soul, and mind, because that's a 100% thing. It's not just sometimes or when it's convenient. The sun is always shining, isn't it? Always. When does it stop shining? You might not know it's shining. A cloud could be in a way, or it's nighttime. It's still shining, though. That's us. We're supposed to just be shining all the time. Just energy, just love all the time. What comes after that, sort of up to you. If you're leading with love, then, go ahead and be creative with your love. But you're supposed to be universally loving to everything, every aspect of your being. Not just your friends, or not just situations that you think are important. You're supposed to be shining all the time, to love everything. Love this being and that being and that being without discrimination. Right? He put no clauses on it. In fact, he said, love your enemies. You love your friends. You love everybody. With all your heart, soul, and mind. All right? No exceptions. So then it's so simple, isn't it? If you can get into the land of spirit or bring the Tao to earth, or in the Lord's Prayer on earth as is in heaven, if you could do that, just got to leave the light on. That's it. Now, we'll be talking more in a minute, and certainly future lectures coming up on this, but what is that love? Well, simply, I've got this idea over here. Love, capital L, is not the same as small love. Right? Love, small l, is just loving human things. chocolate chip cookies, or your friends, or a sunset, whatever. And there's nothing wrong with that kind of love. Do that. But capital L love is literally what Jesus is saying. Love every aspect of your being. If you love it all, won't the sun keep shining? And he doesn't say to discriminate or to change your mind at any point. Just keep shining. That's it. Simple idea. Now, what if you could practice loving everything? Go back to the Dorothy mirror. And if at every person you look at, you think love without discrimination, in every circumstance, in every event, all your adversities, what if you just keep loving it? Like, I don't like this, but I do love it. Why? Because it's getting you past the ego, and it's bringing us together in a way that we don't even know and understand. Not quite yet. Although it feels like it, you should be able to feel that piece of it. Now, what isn't love is sympathy versus empathy. Okay? Sympathy is when you see human circumstances and you feel bad for each other. I feel bad for this person, okay? And the ego thinks that's love, but I feel really bad, okay? These poor people, they're suffering. That's not loving God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength unless you believe God is actually screwing people over, right? Trust is a great way to think of it. On the highest of levels, don't stop loving ever at any time. Now here's where hypocrite Steve comes in, the blind guide. Why am I worried about anything? Why would I worry about anything? If this is all part of a God's divine plan and all of us are being awakened using each other like the Dorothy mirror, why would I worry about anything? It's always the right reflection. Buddha teaches that exact thing. It's always the right reflection. Every aspect of our being is teaching us exactly what we need to be experiencing, without exception ever. Why would we stop loving ever? And what happens when you do stop loving, by the way? Especially the higher you go, you feel it fast. I always refer to the hand on the hot stove thing. You put your hand on the hot stove, you burn fast. Instant reaction. All of our emotional states, especially for spiritual people, especially for people who believe they're spiritual and or have intersected with this type of love before. Oh, their emotions are going to be even harder. It's going to be harder for many different reasons. The dark night of the soul kind of harder. And if you're thinking from the ego, it's going to be, oh, what's wrong with me? I'm such a sad hypocrite, okay? I feel that for a moment, that I'm like, wait. I just want to get back to committing to the thing that I know to be true. My function is love. And if I do that and I'm always shining the light, guess what? My function is love to all beings. That helps me, but who else does it help? The very people that I care about. It also helps the enemies too, all right? The sun is shining on everybody. It's helping everything grow. It's always doing it nonstop. That's us. You're going to help yourself, others, friends and enemies alike. We're all growing together.